Imagine risking your life to drive through a flooded city for like a mandatory all-hands-on-deck meeting at work.
Oh, man, just navigating down trees and sitting in terrible gridlock.
Exactly. You finally drag yourself into the office break room, and the second you arrive, your boss walks in and says, "Actually, the weather is just too bad today, so we're canceling the meeting. Everybody go home."
I mean, I'd be furious. You already made the trip.
Right. And that level of administrative absurdity is exactly what sparked a massive political meltdown in the Sri Lankan parliament during the week of March 17th to the 20th, 2026. Welcome to the deep dive.
It is a scenario that genuinely defies logic, but it perfectly sets the stage for what we're unpacking with you today.
Yeah, so on the table, we have a recent Sri Lankan opposition bulletin, specifically the Special Budget 2026 edition, alongside the parliamentary broadcast dubbing script from that exact same week.
And together, they provide this really fascinating window into a country grappling with, well, interconnected crises.
Now, before we really get into the weeds here, we do need to lay down a crucial ground rule for you, the listener.
Yes, very important.
The materials we're looking at are inherently political documents. They reflect the specific viewpoints, the framing, and the allegations of the Sri Lankan political opposition.
Right, and we are not here to validate or endorse these claims, nor are we taking sides.
Exactly. Our mission is strictly neutral. We just want to impartially report on the ideas contained in these sources so you can understand the current political discourse.
And see how a localized procedural fight reveals a much, much larger national picture.
So that procedural fight began with that canceled meeting analogy we just talked about. The government officially proposed suspending the Wednesday parliamentary sitting, citing a severe national fuel crisis.
Yeah, they argued that bringing everyone to the capital was just too much of a drain on national resources.
But the opposition's response was absolute fury because, members of parliament from all over the island had already traveled to Colombo.
They had already burned the fuel.
Right. So the leader of the opposition took the floor to point out this glaring contradiction. If the objective is conservation, sending everyone back home after they've already made the trip achieves literally nothing.
It's totally counterproductive.
The opposition argued this fuel excuse was really nothing but a smokescreen to avoid debate and conceal governmental incompetence.
Which forces us to look at the parliamentary schedule for that specific Wednesday. Like, what was so threatening that the government would allegedly fake a scheduling crisis to avoid it?
Yeah, what were they running from?
According to the bulletin, it traces back to a massive scandal brewing in the energy sector. The opposition had just handed a no-confidence motion to the Speaker against the Minister of Energy, Honorable 𝗙𝗦𝗕𝗏𝗦𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏
endangering national energy security through the corrupt procurement of substandard coal for the 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗜𝗕𝗘 power plant in 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗜𝗕𝗙.
And they didn't just focus on the present, right?
No, the motion dragged up his past. It referenced corruption charges filed in the Colombo High Court from his tenure at the Lanka fertilizer company.
Wow, so the underlying argument from the opposition, voiced by MPs like 𝗦𝗦𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗕𝗦𝗪, is that the energy crisis isn't simply an unavoidable consequence of global events.
Right. It's a symptom of chronic management failure. You also had MP 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗪 claiming that the gas shortage was actually entirely predictable.
Yeah, he stated he had warned Parliament back in December, alleging the crisis stemmed from a supply contract being suddenly shifted from an Omani company to a Swiss one.
Wait, hold on. I mean, why would shifting a contract from one company to another cause a nationwide gas crisis? Is it just a matter of the new company charging more?
Well, no, it's much more mechanical than that. When a nation shifts a major sovereign energy contract midstream, it requires recertifying vessels, altering massive international letters of credit.
Oh, wow. So it's a huge logistical nightmare.
Exactly. And adjusting delivery timetables. If you initiate that disruption in December, you are hitting the global market just as winter heating demand in the Northern Hemisphere spikes.
Oh, I see.
So the supply chain breaks, and the domestic reserves run dry before the new supplier can effectively come online.
Okay, that makes sense. And while all these high-stakes accusations of systemic collapse are flying around, the bulletin includes this incredibly surreal detail.
Oh, the stage drama.
Yes, the Opposition Welfare Association successfully organized a stage drama called 361. It's wild to think about. You have lawmakers alleging the collapse of democracy and national infrastructure, and simultaneously hosting standard theater productions.
It perfectly captures the duality of an institutional ecosystem, I think. But to return to the physical infrastructure, that substandard coal mentioned in the no confidence motion is really where political rhetoric slams into physical reality.
I am really glad you brought that up because, okay, let's unpack this. If the country is supposedly short on fuel because of global events, how does buying bad coal that actively breaks your own power plant fit into the government's explanation?
It doesn't. And the Sectoral Oversight Committee on Environment, Agriculture, and Resource Sustainability, which is chaired by MP 𝗦𝗦𝗕𝗓𝗦𝗧, presented some staggering numbers on this.
Yeah, they noted the plant had 7 blockages in a single day. How does coal actually block a power plant?
So it comes down to thermodynamics. Substandard coal generally has a lower calorific value and a much, much higher ash content.
Okay.
Because it doesn't burn as hot or as cleanly, the plant operators have to burn significantly more of it just to generate the same baseline level of electricity.
Right.
And the resulting byproduct isn't just fine dust. It's often this heavy, dense, unburned slag that physically jams the exhaust chutes and filtration systems.
So because they bought cheap coal, they are literally choking the machinery.
Exactly.
And the sheer volume of waste, it's terrifying. The sources state the plant is now producing 800 metric tons of ash every single day.
Is a massive amount of waste.
It is. And that ash has to be dumped onto an ash mound, which instantly creates a severe environmental and public health hazard for the people living in the 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗕𝗘 area.
Yeah, and the financial bleeding is just as severe. The government's infrastructure committee was scrambling to recover costs through performance bonds and demurrage charges, even seeking the Attorney General's advice on tender conditions.
I always hear the word demurrage thrown around in these shipping crises. Let's translate that for someone outside the logistics industry.
Sure, go for it.
Think of demurrage like a late fee on a rental car, except the rental car is a massive ocean freighter. The late fee is tens of thousands of dollars a day, and it's being paid for with your tax dollars.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. If the coal is bad and the plant systems are backed up with 800 tons of ash, the incoming ships can't unload. They just sit in the port, racking up these massive penalties.
Precisely. And while the national power grid is choking on bad coal, the everyday fuel distribution system for citizens was also just collapsing. The sources highlight that the QR code system used to ration fuel was experiencing major technical failures.
And this is where the digital failures crush the working class. The opposition pointed out that because of these rationing failures, the private sector was being instructed to close on Wednesdays.
Which is devastating.
Absolutely. If you are a daily wage earner and the government forces your workplace to shut down because a QR code server crashed or the fuel didn't arrive, you simply don't eat that day.
But the government's official stance, according to the bulletin, deflected away from the QR codes and the bad coal. They blamed the overall fuel crisis on conflicts in the Middle East disrupting the supply lines.
But you can't have a domestic fuel crisis without asking where the fuel comes from in the first place. And that is where the opposition claims the government fundamentally dropped the ball on foreign policy.
Right. The leader of the opposition argued that the government failed to prepare a strategic plan following the U.S. and Israel's attack on Iran back in July 2025.
The geopolitical argument here is that a small island nation's domestic grid is, well, entirely dependent on its foreign policy maneuvering.
Yeah, and the opposition pointed to a massive missed opportunity. They alleged that the United States lifted sanctions on Russia for a 30-day window, and the government was urged to secure Russian oil during this grace period to build up reserves.
But they ignored the proposal.
Exactly.
And it gets worse. MP 𝗦𝗬𝗓𝗦𝗧 claimed the government is actively lying to the public about a lack of strategic oil storage tanks just to justify the empty pumps.
Yeah, he insists the physical infrastructure exists, but the government just failed to utilize it.
But of all the foreign policy issues raised, the incident involving the Iranian vessel, the Irish Dana, is by far the most alarming.
Oh, absolutely. This was brought up by MP 𝗦𝗦𝗕𝗏𝗦𝗧. According to the debate, this Iranian ship was left waiting in international waters for 11 hours without permission to enter Sri Lankan waters.
And because it was left idling, it was subsequently attacked while situated in Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone, or EEZ.
Right.
Wait, I need to push back on this. Why would Sri Lanka intentionally leave an Iranian ship idling just outside its physical borders for 11 hours if there was an active conflict happening?
It's a really good question.
Are the sources implying sheer bureaucratic incompetence, or was this a deliberate geopolitical favor to the attackers?
Well, the sources lean heavily toward the latter implication. Think of it this way. Imagine a landlord sees a tenant being chased down the street by a mob.
Okay.
To stay neutral, The landlord locks the front door of the apartment building, forcing the tenant to stand exposed on the front porch, where they are eventually attacked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The leader of the opposition directly questioned the president's claims of neutrality here.
Right, because Sri Lanka has agreements concerning the maritime zone regarding cyber threats, humanitarian responses, and maritime awareness. The opposition explicitly demanded to know if the United States was informed beforehand that an attack would be carried out on the Irish Dina inside Sri Lankan economic waters. Letting an attack happen in your EEZ completely shatters any illusion of diplomatic neutrality.
It really does. It shows how diplomatic stalling can inadvertently make a nation appear complicit in international military actions.
So we've talked about international waters, geopolitics, and massive coal shipments. But how does this abstract policy failure actually ripple down to the streets?
Well, the sources detail a rapid-fire series of questions raised by MPs understanding Order 27-2, which is the procedure used to demand answers on urgent public matters.
And looking at these grievances, what emerges is a bizarre bifurcation of reality in Sri Lanka.
A split reality is exactly how to describe it. On one side, you have the raw, physical struggle for daily survival. MP Archana Ramanathan painted a picture of absolute chaos in the transport sector.
Right. He described tourists arriving at the main airport in 𝗙𝗢𝗕𝗓𝗏 and getting stranded in the city of Anuradhapura for a week.
A whole week.
Yeah.
And he mentioned it was taking people a full month to scrounge up enough fuel under a strict 30-liter limit just to travel across the island to Jaffna.
The friction of simply trying to move across geographic space has become insurmountable. And meanwhile, trade unions are warning about the skyrocketing prices of basic survival goods, potatoes, onions, lentils, dal.
Yeah, and MP Mujibur Rahman was essentially begging for an economic roadmap, specifically warning that the upcoming Sinhala and Tamil New Year season would be economically wiped out, along with tourism and foreign remittances.
Furthermore, you have MP 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗏𝗕𝗏 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗜𝗕𝗙 raising the unresolved trauma of the Civil War. He brought up the disappeared persons and the Chemini mass graves, pushing for an international intervention because domestic mechanisms have lost all public trust.
That is the survivalist present. But simultaneously, within that exact same parliamentary session, you have lawmakers focused on entirely abstract digital futures.
Yes. MP Ravi Karunanayak shifted the focus to modern finance, demanding answers from the government on the legality of cryptocurrency, money laundering, and data protection from fraudulent websites.
It is so jarring. You have a society where half the population is rationing root vegetables and sitting in a month-long queue to get 30 liters of diesel, and the government is debating blockchain regulation.
It's unbelievable. He was also analyzing aviation service taxes and demanding passenger numbers across 5 different airports: Bandaranaike, Matala, Jaffna, Ratmalana, and Batticaloa.
And wrapping up this fractured picture, MP 𝗙𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 was questioning the criteria for official passports issued to religious leaders.
This scattershot approach, understanding Order 27-2, reveals a society demanding answers on absolutely everything all at once.
Yeah, and it prompted the leader of the opposition to bluntly question the government's actual definition of multidimensional poverty and demand long-term policies for the most vulnerable districts.
Okay, so we spent this entire time talking about humans fighting over abstract concepts, crypto, geopolitical alliances, fuel limits.
Right.
But the sources reveal a literal physical turf war happening on the island that completely recontextualizes everything we've discussed.
Yes, we are talking about the human-elephant conflict.
Yeah.
And the data presented to Parliament by an expert panel, which included Dr. Prithviraj Fernando, Hemantha Withanage, and Professor Vishaka Suryabandara, outlines a spatial reality that is genuinely astonishing.
When I read this in the source material, I had to stop and check the math.
Yeah.
The panel revealed that humans currently inhabit 82% of Sri Lanka's total land area. Elephants, meanwhile, inhabit 62%. That means a massive 44% of the entire nation's landmass is actively shared territory.
It's mind-blowing. Humans and wild elephants are trying to coexist on almost half the island.
And that 44% overlap explains exactly why current mitigation methods have completely failed.
Right. The panel explicitly stated that you cannot just relocate an elephant.
Because if an elephant's historic migration corridor intersects with a human agricultural zone, building a non-standardized electric fence doesn't stop the elephant.
No, the elephant simply tears the fence down because its biological imperative to move across that space overrides a weak barrier.
Which is why the panel's 8-point proposal is so fascinating. They aren't just saying build better fences, though they do want a standardized guidelines manual for them.
Right. They're proposing a massive shift in how the state manages land. They highlighted deep legal contradictions between the wildlife, forest, and agriculture departments that prevent a unified strategy.
They also push for structured compensation and insurance systems for crop and property damage, so a farmer isn't left economically devastated overnight by a herd moving through.
But the most crucial solutions involve shrinking the human footprint. For example, they suggested restricting cattle herds from grazing in forest reserves.
Let me make sure I follow the logic there. If cattle are allowed to graze in the forest preserve, they consume the underbrush that the elephants rely on.
Exactly.
So the elephants begin to starve, and a starving elephant leaves the reserve to raid human villages for food.
Yes. It's an ecological chain reaction driven by poor zoning. The panel also proposed using advanced agricultural technology to achieve higher crop yields from much smaller plots of land.
Oh, that makes sense. If you can grow the same amount of food on less land, you leave more contiguous, undisturbed space for nature, drastically reducing the friction points between the two species.
Exactly.
So, to recap this wild journey we've been on, we started with a localized political fight over a canceled Wednesday meeting due to bad weather and lack of fuel.
Right.
But pulling that single thread unraveled a web connecting naval attacks on an Iranian ship in the exclusive economic zone, a broken power plant choking on 800 tons of toxic ash, tourists stranded for weeks trying to travel north, debates over cryptocurrency regulation, and an active daily battle for survival between humans and elephants.
It perfectly illustrates the sheer density of governance in a developing nation. And if I can leave you with one final thought to mull over, it's a pattern that emerged throughout this entire deep dive. Look at the core of every single crisis we discussed today.
How do you mean?
Think about the 800 daily tons of toxic ash that require a physical mountain to be dumped on, poisoning the landscape. Think about the lack of strategic oil storage tanks, a failure to allocate space for reserves.
Wow, yeah.
Think about the tourists trapped in 𝗦𝗦𝗕𝗏𝗪, unable to overcome the physical distance to Jaffna. Think about the Irish Dina being attacked because of where it was positioned in the physical space of the exclusive economic zone.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
And finally, the staggering reality that 44% of the nation's land is an active battleground with wild elephants. Every single one of these is fundamentally a crisis of spatial management.
That is an incredible point. The entire country is caught in a physical bottleneck.
While the politicians in Parliament are arguing over abstract no-confidence motions and zoning for the Colombo port city, where the bulletin notes beach space was artificially increased by 350% just to boost tourism, the rest of the country is fighting for an inch of stable ground.
It's such a stark contrast.
Right. The true challenge for a developing island nation in the 21st century isn't just navigating the murky, theoretical waters of global geopolitics or digital currency. It's figuring out how to successfully, equitably, and sustainably manage its incredibly finite physical space.
So the next time your boss cancels a meeting because of a little rain, just take a deep breath and remember, well, at least you weren't sharing the break room with an elephant while waiting on a ship full of bad coal, hoping a geopolitical conflict doesn't turn your lights off. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.